With the release of the Sacrifice and the conclusion of Warframe's first story arc, there were at long last concrete confirmations of theories that had been held by many for some time. While the amount of completely new information was somewhat limited compared to the other two cinematic quests, having these lore theories irrefutably confirmed is still incredibly useful. The first and perhaps most important is that Warframes are in fact made from infested people. This has been hinted at before in numerous sources, including the recent Mirage Prime trailer, but it is now certain. But Warframes are not made from any infestation. Instead, they are made with a specific strain of the infestation known as Helminth. Previous strains were intended merely to augment the host, allowing them to keep their memories and minds, but this proved a failure. Instead, the Helminth strain was used to completely erase the subject's will, leaving them docile but unusable for fighting. These subjects were likely left inert until a frame type was built around them, and are likely the individuals we find in cryopods, unactivated infested hybrids awaiting their final form. But while the Helminth strain subsumes the subject's will, it does not erase it completely as designed. As seen in the second Dream Quest, there is still a base instinct that remains, though how simple this instinct is in most frames has yet to be explored completely. This is why Umbra is such a unique frame. Unlike the other frames formed from the Helminth strain, Umbra was infected with a strain specifically designed to keep his memory alive, though only a small fragment of it, specifically the murder of his son Isa. This is why Ballas refers to it as a miracle, as previous attempts at leaving the host cognizant were the reason the initial Warframe project failed. Because of this, it is unlikely, though not impossible, that other Umbra frames exist. It is for this reason that Stalker is still potentially an individual stuck in a transference loop, and not another Umbra strain-infested Warframe. At the very least, it is certainly possible that reverse engineering this strain could allow us to create new Umbra frames by imbuing them with this unique strain and then taming them, as we did with Umbra. It is important to take note of this taming process, as previously it was thought that Tenno were assimilating the Warframes as parasites, not as partners. Now, however, it is shown that through the Tenno's manipulation of the Void, the Mind, and the infestation itself, they are able to provide therapeutic healing for the frames, quelling their rage and pain, as we saw with Umbra. However, this process was likely far more smooth in old times, as with Umbra's rage being at the forefront of its infestation strain's design, the pushback from Umbra was likely far more intense than most frames provide during the therapy process. As a small aside, the Sacrifice shows us a bit of world building with the Dax, showing that ranks of Dax were distinguished by their helms, with Isa being a low-ranking Dax, Teshin being an upper or middle-ranked Dax, and Umbra being the highest rank achievable, most likely a commander or a captain of some kind. Moving on from the Umbra and the Warframes, the Sacrifice added a great deal of confirmation about Ballas and his motivations. Another brief bit of world building is when Ballas mentions dualism and the vain faith. Dualism, the belief of reality and mind, body and soul, matter and energy being concepts tied to our dimension and the Void, shows that the Void was believed to be heaven, hell, or some other transcendent reality beyond our own, and was held in mythic regard. However, over time, as the knowledge of the Void grew greater, the Orokin began to believe themselves as gods, having mastered what was ostensibly the higher plane of existence. This is what leads to the vain faith, where the Orokin hold narcissistic views of themselves and require all others below them to follow suit. Calling into question their infallible judgment or power was viewed as heresy, apostasy, and punishable by death. The vain faith required its followers to believe in the Orokin's guidance and direction above all else, and so, when Margulis called the gods into question, Ballas was forced to choose between his love or his faith. However, Ballas chose faith, perhaps out of fear or perhaps out of desperation, but nonetheless, he placed the gods above himself. But this filled him with a guilt so intense that over time he grew sick with it, and plotted to kill the gods he once worshipped and walked among. This led Ballas to turn to Hunhow and the Sentients, plotting in secret to divulge crucial information to them that would lead to the fall of the Empire. As an aside, it would seem that even in ages past, Ballas resembled his modern, twisted form. This could further add credence to the sense manipulation theory, but could just as easily be Ballas choosing not to alter his form again, abandoning the vain faith to the extreme and allowing his body to become grotesque. Regardless, it is due to Ballas's betrayal that Nata was able to infiltrate the hierarchy, answering the long-standing question of how she got so close with the Tenno. It is also possible that Ballas had Nata appear as Margulis to act as a perverse surrogate for his dead love and exposed her to the Tenno's impression of who Margulis was, forming her into an idealized version of the dead Archimedean and not who she may have been in reality. Because Nata is the Mimic Queen, she was able to instantly change herself to become what the Tenno saw Margulis as, a mother. But it is likely that in doing this, she deluded herself into becoming the role she was playing, eventually shaking herself free of the sentience bonds. But when Ballas returns and shakes her resolve, she is quick to remember who she was and what she was meant to do, returning her to the fold of the sentient hive mind, reclaimed as Hunhao states in the Nata quest. It is likely that she is not fully mind-controlled per se, but more that she has returned to her previous mental state, awakening herself from her own dream as the Lotus, the mother she so dearly wished to be. Her love for us still burns, but it is now overtaken by the duty to her people and the all-consuming embrace of her mother's hive mind. At the conclusion of the sacrifice quest, she returns to this mother. While sentients are asexual, it does not seem that she refers to Hunhao, as she typically refers to him as father. Additionally, the new war teaser shows a different voice consoling her, likely the aforementioned mother. Not the head of the sentient attack force like Hunhao, but a greater form. A living outpost from which most of the sentients who attacked the Origin system were born. It is still unclear if she has in fact returned to Tau, or if she simply retreated far beyond the outer terminus, as Tau is typically referred to as the Dark or Black Star, and Nata's speech at the end of the sacrifice refers to the mother as drifting and gaunt far beyond the bleak star, and not present in Tau itself. On the topic of the sentients, the question of why the sentients attacked the Origin system has finally been answered. It was far more simple than originally thought, and was merely out of fear that their old masters would destroy the world they had created for themselves. A preemptive attack to protect their future, as opposed to a desperate attempt at revenge. This paints the sentients in a slightly less sympathetic light, as while the Orokin would very likely have posed a threat, they still attacked first, and with great cost to the lesser peoples of the Origin system. This also means that Tau is likely still alive and well, and that Hunhao, Nata, and the mother sacrificed their reproductive properties not out of necessity, but merely as a sacrifice for what they perceived as the greater good. But as with many things in the Warframe universe, this is mostly uncertain. But until the old war rages anew, this is what we know.